Hundreds of pro-Palestine protesters took over one of Britain's largest shopping centres in London yesterday on Boxing Day, where a massive Palestine flag was hung and protesters clashed with security guard. Here's the moment it happened. Have a look.
Just after midnight, under the orange glow of emergency lights, a routine shopping night in central London ended in sudden silence. Metal shutters slammed down, trains slowed, sirens echoed through streets that, minutes earlier, were still alive with movement. According to internal assessments, what triggered the shutdown was not a single incident, but a cascading failure that authorities were not prepared to explain. Reports suggest the first alerts came in quietly. Security contractors flagged unusual crowd movements inside one of London's busiest shopping complexes. Foot traffic spiked without warning. Groups formed, dissolved, reformed. CCTV operators noticed tension before they saw violence. Then the calls began. Shouting, running. Parents separated from children. Within minutes, the decision was made: shut it down. Lock every entrance. Evacuate whoever could still be guided out. Officials later described the scene as fluid. Witnesses used a different word: chaos. By the time uniformed officers arrived in force, the damage was already psychological. Storefronts stood half open, abandoned mid-transaction. Escalators froze with shoes still visible on the steps. Food trays lay untouched. The sound that dominated was not screaming but confusion. People asking each other what was happening and receiving no answer. Sources close to the situation claim officers on the ground quickly realised this wasn't a typical disturbance. Crowd control protocols failed to slow the surge. Instructions relayed from command were outdated almost as soon as they were issued. Radio chatter reflected uncertainty rather than authority. One senior responder would later admit, off the record, that the system reacted but did not lead. As families spilled into surrounding streets, police lines struggled to hold shape. Shops beyond the mall closed preemptively. Transport hubs reported surges of people attempting to leave the area at once. Within an hour, social media was already calling it something larger: a warning, a sign. Authorities insisted calm would return by morning. Internally, however, analysts were asking a more dangerous question: how did this happen so fast? The following day, investigators gathered in windowless rooms, replaying footage frame by frame. Patterns emerged. The crowd behaviour inside the mall matched movements observed in 3 other incidents across the city in recent months, each dismissed at the time as unrelated. Similar timing, similar flashpoints, similar confusion. According to internal reviews, these were not spontaneous breakdowns of order. They were stress tests. Data teams began mapping connections, temporary housing clusters, asylum accommodation sites, transport corridors. On paper, none of it looked alarming, but overlaid together, the picture changed. Movement funnels appeared, communication nodes, logistics that suggested coordination rather than coincidence. This wasn't failure, one analyst reportedly said. It was facilitation. The inquiry soon shifted from what happened to how the conditions were created. Contracts were reviewed, emergency housing deals, oversight waivers, special exemptions quietly signed years earlier to ease pressure on the system. Each decision made sense in isolation. Together, they formed something else entirely. Investigators uncovered a network operating in the shadows of legitimacy. Not a criminal gang in the traditional sense, but a web of shell charities, subcontractors, and legal intermediaries exploiting humanitarian frameworks. According to sources close to the situation, these entities funneled people through loopholes faster than agencies could track. Housing allocations overlapped, identities blurred, responsibility dissolved. At the centre of several approvals was a high-ranking official whose portfolio once focused on crisis mitigation. Their decisions, critics argue, prioritised speed over control, flexibility over verification. The goal was to keep pressure low and numbers manageable. Instead, the system bent. This wasn't a breach, another internal report stated. It was a quiet re-engineering of limits. As the findings circulated upward, emergency meetings were called. Briefings labelled confidential warned of compounding risks, urban saturation, enforcement fatigue, public perception shifting faster than policy could respond. One assessment predicted localised unrest events within weeks if corrective action stalled. Plans were drafted, enforcement surges, accelerated removals, border tightening proposals framed as temporary. But almost immediately, resistance surfaced. Legal challenges paused operations before they began. Courts questioned timelines. Advocacy groups filed injunctions. Within departments, senior advisors cautioned against optics. According to internal communications, momentum evaporated. On the streets, the consequences were already visible. Knife incidents climbed in certain boroughs. Robberies followed predictable transit routes. Shop owners installed metal shutters that never fully reopened. Parents adjusted routines. Frontline officers reported feeling boxed in, expected to restore order without the tools to do so. Public anger grew quietly. Not in marches at first, but in conversations. Online forums filled the gap left by official silence. Polls suggested rising concern, yet public statements remained cautious, restrained, abstract. Critics argued enforcement seemed selective, that consequences landed unevenly, that justice had tears. Trust began to fray. For many, the mall shutdown became a symbol, not because of what was destroyed, but because of what it revealed. A system stretched thin, authority hesitant, accountability blurred by process. People sensed that the rules still existed, but no longer applied equally. Behind closed doors, strategists warned of a pressure cooker effect. When expression is constrained, resentment doesn't vanish, it compresses. Online speech faced swift moderation. Street crime lingered unresolved. The contrast was not lost on the public. A nation, according to one analyst, was holding its breath. History suggests collapses rarely announce themselves loudly. They arrive through routines disrupted, norms adjusted, small emergencies normalised until the extraordinary feels expected. Families adapt, communities withdraw, silence becomes strategy. And then, sometimes, the release comes suddenly. London woke up after the shutdown pretending it was over. The mall reopened days later. The lights came back on. But the question remained unanswered. If this could happen here without warning, what else was already in motion? What follows next depends on whether those watching choose to act or continue looking away. The reopening of the shopping complex was meant to signal control. Fresh signage, increased patrols, carefully worded statements about safety and reassurance. But beneath the surface, confidence had already cracked. According to internal briefings, foot traffic returned slower than expected. Shoppers hesitated. Businesses shortened hours. Security presence doubled, not to project strength, but to prevent a repeat. Behind the scenes, the response apparatus struggled to catch up with reality. Intelligence units pushed updated threat models, warning that the conditions which led to the shutdown had not been resolved. Temporary fixes masked systemic strain. The same transport routes remained overloaded. The same accommodation clusters continued to grow. The same legal bottlenecks froze enforcement. Reports suggest frontline officers quietly changed behaviour. Calls once classified as routine were escalated faster. Patrols avoided certain flashpoints unless backup was guaranteed. The language shifted from prevention to containment, not because of fear, but because of exhaustion. For communities living closest to the pressure zones, the shift was unmistakable. Parents altered school routes. Shopkeepers removed displays. Residents spoke of nights punctured by sirens and mornings filled with rumour. Official updates remained vague. No ongoing threat? Situation under review. The distance between lived experience and public messaging widened. According to one internal assessment, that gap became the real risk. As weeks passed, analysts noticed a troubling trend. Each incident, even when minor, carried disproportionate impact. Small altercations escalated faster. Crowd reactions intensified. Trust, once eroded, did not regenerate easily. The public no longer waited for confirmation. They assumed instability as default. Within government departments, discussions turned philosophical. What does enforcement mean when legitimacy is questioned? What does order look like when rules are perceived as optional? Memos circulated warning that authority depends less on power than belief. Once belief collapses, force becomes brittle. The fictional official, whose earlier decisions enabled the system's flexibility, now faded from view. Transfers, resignations, silence, no accountability announcement followed. Critics argue the absence spoke louder than any admission. The message received by the public was simple. Consequences were abstract, not personal. Meanwhile, the organised network uncovered in earlier investigations did not vanish. It adapted. Routes shifted. Interfaces changed. Where oversight tightened, activity slowed, only to resurface elsewhere. The system's very complexity made it resilient to correction. Every fix created a new loophole. This is what happens, one fictional strategist observed, when policy outruns capacity. The silent majority watched all of this unfold with unease. Surveys suggested overwhelming concern, yet public discourse remained muted. Speaking too plainly carried social cost. Questioning outcomes risked misinterpretation. Silence for many felt safer than scrutiny. But silence has weight. Pressure accumulates in unseen places, at kitchen tables, in late-night conversations, in the quiet recalibration of trust. A society does not fracture all at once. It thins, it stretches, it grows brittle at the edges. The mall shutdown, once treated as an anomaly, became a reference point. Before that night, after that night, it entered the collective memory not as a tragedy, but as a warning, one that arrived early, whispered rather than shouted. In the end, this fictional crisis offers no clean resolution, no decisive intervention, no single villain, only a question hanging unanswered in the air. When systems bend long enough, they don't always snap. Sometimes they simply stop holding. And when that happens, the cost is not counted in headlines, but in trust, quietly lost.